to bring traditional things from the roots. I mean, from the women, from the people who really live in the place into focus, and not the traditional leaders who were as a power player. But let me just say one word to this investment issue, which is in the papers, and where the German company is also very prominently being quoted as not investing anymore. I would say that in this, I'm not giving an official statement here, so don't quote me. But I think
you're on form, Monica. You're on
but
form.
I still want to. I still want to say to make a point that investment strategies are never one reason decision. So there's a whole investment environment. And for car production, which is very, very central, and I think Carl from NUMSA has made a very, very important and very detailed statement about NUMSA's position there and how important car production is for the development of manufacturing and the economy. But I want to say that, I mean, whether Mercedes or BMW produce new models is not only informed by the strike season, because this is something everyone knows since ages. This is part of your industrial history and tradition, culture. But I mean, there is the AGOA agreement, which is under discussion now. There are a lot of other issues that might inform a car company to see whether it is interesting to invest to bring new investment. So I wouldn't like to discuss this in this black and white thing, but we have to decide about the whole environment and the homelands. I use this term now because they are still labor reserve for North African economy. So whether the working and living conditions and the ownership of land, well, this is settled in a way that is good for the people, might even inform these things. So you cannot say, I mean, here are the people's interest and here is the capitalist interest. I mean, just to make this point, I don't want to go further into detail, but I thought I was qualified to say something to that.
Thanks very much, Monica, on that.
Sorry, I don't even have time. My watch stopped. I have a problem with the blood.
Okay,
what time? What's the time?
We usually close at 9. It's about 10 past 9.
Okay,
so if we can just do a very quick
sure.
wrap up. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Nobuniso.
I want to make it very clear that the NDP does not create apartheid geography. There is nothing in the NDP that reproduces apartheid geography, and that's not what I said. The maps that I showed there are from the 1986 Homelands Act, which created, which was when the final Bantustan was created, so that was the latest. And then in 2003, something called Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act came with the Traditional Council's map, which consolidated, basically which built on the othered identities that were created by the apartheid government. And I also showed the map from Stats SA, which basically shows that these areas are also the areas where extreme forms of poverty historically are found. My point is that if the NDP, which it doesn't, look at how its plan is based on a state, on a nationhood that is being fragmented, that is fragmented and that is fragmenting, it is not going to succeed. So this is not the creation of the NDP. It is the creation of other arms of government. So I need to make that very clear in defense of NDP. There are other things that I want to fight with the NDP about, but I won't blame them for that. Now, the second issue is You know, when I read Mamdani's Citizen and the Subject, it shows you how the mighty have fallen. I looked at it and I was like, oh, bloody hell, you know, this doesn't apply to us, you know, and actually I was quite annoyed, you know, because I felt, and I said, you know, our systems of traditional governance are different from a number of societies that he was looking at. And as you know, you can't look at traditional governance amongst the so-called Amaxhosa, whatever that is meant, through the lens of the Ugandan experience. So I was very, you know, dismissive of the bifurcated, or rather the self-evident bifurcation that you saw between citizen and the subject. That was in the early 2000s. Okay. So now I live with the reality of not only having to swallow my words, but with the actual reality of seeing people being subjects in ways that even in the most conservative cultural interpretation, they shouldn't be. You know, amongst the Tembu, we don't go on our knees. I'm not Tembu, but I happen to live in the area that is between the Tembu and the Tsalega. We don't go onto our knees, we don't papata, we don't do that. Okay. There are other forms of humbling yourself. And I'm not looking down on cultures that do that. You understand? When you go to the north, let's say amongst a group around Abavenda, you find people who go on their knees and they papata, and that's how they show respect and subservience, right? Now, you listen to the national discourse that is led by traditional leaders, and this need for singular expression of cultural customs and practices. You understand? And to see that this is moving towards codification. And that is what the traditional courts bill does, because it gives them, and then it says, we need to have a standardized customary law. That's very dangerous, right? Because the processes of evolution, of cultural evolution, are very, very different. So that's the first thing. And it is, by the way, explained in terms of social cohesion, right? So people will say, we need to use the values of Ubuntu. Right now I'm going to speak as a Xhosa-speaking person. They say, Ubuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and you know, as a person, you have to be dependent on others. But nobody will ever say, but also within Ubuntu, at the core of it is an individual. Akongwali phandelenye, ephandelenye yenethole. You cannot look after your neighbor until you are in a position to do so. So the individual and the collective, in the context of Ubuntu, coexist. That is why, and it's a universal principle. The essentialists will fight with me, but that is why on the airport they say, first put on your own mask before you help the child, right? And there is a reason why the individual is being erased, right? Because it's erasing the individual agency so that we can all have common voice and have no popcorn parties and have no dissent. But dissent is part of who we are, not only as a modern democratic state, but also even in customary practices. You know that there always was a court jester it's not only in Shakespeare, you know, in the court of the king, the one who tells the emperor that you have no clothes, but he pretends to be mad, right? So even the very notion of praise poetry Imbongi has become the one who sings the praises, the positive praises to you. But if Imbongi knew their role, they would have said to Mandla Mandela when they bonga him, that do not wear umweba, my child. It is too big a garment for you. You understand? And it's this inability to unpack this kind of common ancestry that we're talking about, that then we get all these little bits, and then we put them together. And it starts at the top, actually, because 99% of what President Zuma explains as Zulu cultural practice, it is not. Okay? It is his own interpretation, that is one. Two, it may also be the one person that is talking about, maybe a cultural practice of a particular Zulu community and a Zulu construction, right? I can read Shepston about construction of Zulu-ness and so on and so forth. Now, what do we do about the fact that we have disagreements, right? The disagreements are not actually, the fundamental disagreements, in my view, are not with the NDP. The fundamental disagreements are our own understanding of what South Africa is. The Constitution says on chapter 12, recognizes traditional leaders, and it's very clear on what role traditional leaders should play, right? All these powers that they have, including over minerals, it is unconstitutional, and it is also uncustomary, right? So the Constitution actually has got a very neat understanding, because it says this is not a theocratic state, right? So you don't have to be Christians, you don't have to be Muslims, right? And similarly, you have a right to whatever customs and cultures that you may want. Now, assuming Eddie, a son, marries my daughter, and they decide that because now I want Lobola, so we agree, right? We live in the same street next door, never see him, but anyway, you know, and he reneges on that agreement, right? We are in the suburb. Okay, the Constitution says I can go, ideally I should be able to go to Johannesburg, to any court, and say, but the Websters are not being faithful to their word. But I can't complain in this court because you don't have the competence to deal with this. So please bring somebody who can assist me, who knows customary law. That's what the Constitution provides for. It means I can go to Sandton and ask a court to have the proficiency to deal with customary law matters, not this congealed geographical thing that says only if you live in a particular area. Because what it does is that it creates stratification. It assumes that because I live in an urban area, that I have lived behind, that I left behind whatever cultural identity, and I will only claim it in December. You know, when I go and slaughter, then I'll become a Xhosa woman again, right? So, finally, self-determination. My issue with Orania is again around boundaries. You know, and we can have a conversation around this, because I do think that what we don't have a space for, it's a hot topic, it's politically difficult to take it on, right? But there is no reason why you can't live according to whatever cultural practices that you want. But the zoning of the space is not self-determination. You know, it's a boundary, and it's a congealing of boundary, and it's also an exclusion of the other. But to be able for us to confront that, it also means that we have to confront the unfinished business that was not sorted out at negotiations, right? So I believe that all of us have a right to self-determination, and we self-determine at any point, at any given moment. But I don't agree with self-determination that says your culture, your religion, your gender, your sexuality is more important and more relevant than the other. Now finally, I think that we have to accept that we are products of colonial construction, that we are affected by it, that we are tainted by it, we are even enriched by it. And we live in a space of conflictedness within ourselves. We are never going to have a national development plan that is going to be neat and that is going to be tidy. It is going to have those kinds of contradictions. Even the South African Constitution is a site of struggle. Because it is a product of this society. Where the problem is that the dominant voice is the voice also that holds power and that holds resources. And that is where then the conflict, that is a natural contradiction that we have to live with, becomes a problem and inhibits our growth. So I think, to a large extent, the NDP tries to grapple with some of these issues, but I think that it is not able to, because all of us, we default to what we know. And one of the things that the NDP, whether you have a feminist or 10 feminists or 10 Marxists, whatever in the NDP, it's going to have to be negotiated by a number of commissioners. It's going to have to be negotiated in your public hearings. It's going to be negotiated with government. It's going to be negotiated with the key sectors, including the IMF and World Bank and whatever, right? And you need to have a plan that speaks to all of those things. So it is going to be untidy. But I do think that in deepening the conversation and perhaps in moving away from saying the NDP, regurgitates what we've seen before and so on, perhaps we need to say it doesn't address the nation, because the nation is gendered and it doesn't talk about how gendered that nation and how we reproduce those gendered patterns of the nation. And I believe that the IMF, World Bank, investor